Welcome back. So today I wanted to talk about sampling. Sampling is something that I've actually fairly recently gotten into, and it wasn't until I got into it that I discovered there's actually a sampler just built right into Logic. A lot of people probably already know this. I just discovered it and started using it more frequently, and it is awesome, especially when you compare it to other samplers like the Contact sampler that's very popular. Definitely more professional, definitely worth checking out, but also vastly more complicated than just using the built-in sampler in Logic. If you just want to quickly pull up a sound, create a unique instrument or texture for a piece, it's just really easy to use and readily available. So a couple of reasons why I think musicians should consider getting into sampling. The first is uniqueness. So being able to differentiate yourself as a musician, especially if you use a lot of MIDI sampled instruments, you're going to find that using your own instruments immediately differentiates you because we all have access to those sample libraries, those virtual instruments that are available for purchase and for free online. So if you're just using those, all of our music is going to start sounding the same over time. The second reason I think is just utility and convenience. So the instrument that I want to sample today is a harmonium that my wife and I brought back from India. It's a beautiful sounding instrument. However, it is incredibly difficult to play for a lot of reasons. One, there's a billow mechanism that essentially you have to push to sound any notes, which is very loud and it's very annoying to do. The second is it's just very cumbersome. So to get it out of its box and to set it up was just so difficult that I found myself not really wanting to play it very often. So I was actually planning to give the thing away. And before I did that, I decided to sample it and get the sound out of it. And now that I'm able to kind of experiment with that, I realize this is the best of both worlds for this and other instruments that I own that I don't play very often, because I'm able to get the sound and it's just super convenient to pull this up as a preset in Logic. So that's why I think musicians might want to explore using samples and sampler instruments. And that's why I wanted to share this quick tutorial on how I quickly create sample instruments, and then we'll walk through the results together as well. So let's get into it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set up our mics the way we want them, and then we're going to set our levels. And I'm going to set a click track, and I'm going to set it really slow, like 60 BPM, and essentially have that click running and try to hit the downbeats of every other measure. And I'm literally, with this instrument, because it's so small, I'm just going to go up the keyboard in half steps, starting with the lowest note. And I'm just going to try to play those notes as smoothly as I possibly can on the downbeat. And with some instruments, you might want to go, multiple passes with different velocities. This instrument is pretty much the same at every velocity. So I'm just going to do one round, and I'm going to try to keep the bellows as quiet as possible. I think they're kind of cool for some atmosphere, but I don't want them to be super loud. I also don't want to press too hard because I don't want to peak my levels. So I won't make you watch this entire process of going up the keyboard, but you get the idea. It's pretty painstaking work and can take quite a while with some instruments, but in this case, it was pretty fast. Okay, so first step, I'm going to go in and make sure that all of these different samples are actually hitting on the one. If you're able to play it more accurately than I was, this wouldn't be necessary. You could actually just select bar next to the snap options, and then do an option click with the scissor tool, and you'd be able to just get a cut on the one of each sample. But I actually had to do this manually. And then I'm going to eliminate any dead space between samples and just try to make sure each sample is sounding as clean as possible. And then I'm going to try using option click with the scissor tool wherever possible, just to finish up these cuts here. I'm going to add just a little bit of compression to these samples, completely a matter of taste, not necessary, but I just want these samples to be just a little hotter in the mix. So you can obviously do all kinds of things at this stage just so that your sample just kind of, sculpt your sampler instrument. In my case, I'm just going to add a little bit of compression here. Now I'm just going to listen through each sample and make sure everything's sounding good, just to try to save myself a little bit of work later. Now I'm just going to add fades at the end of each sample, just to, again, make them sound as clean as possible. And you can just do this by selecting all. And then after that, Control B is going to let you bounce these in place. So it'll bounce this to a new track. And then you can do the Option click shortcut with the scissor tool to, again, recut these samples. And the reason for that is for this next step, when we drag them over to the left-hand panel, this is going to allow us to pick sampler chromatic map, which just ensures that all these different samples get mapped to the correct pitch value. Now we have our finished instrument, Harmonium here, and it is a MIDI instrument. So let's take a look at what we did here. So here you can see the sample map. And since we did the chromatic map specifically on the sampler, it chromatically mapped all the notes that we inputted. So it's taking the literal actual samples that we played for each key and pairing them with the keys on the MIDI map here. Because the Harmonium has a short octave, we only got these notes here in the mid-range. So what I did is I used this command and pulled outward to extend our map all the way. And what that does is just pitch shifts using one of the existing samples and creates new samples for us for all the remaining keys so that we get all the octaves. And yeah, it sounds really good. So let's just test it out a little bit. Yeah, so I'm really pleased with that. I mean, I think, there's obviously things we could do to make it better, but I think as just a first pass, it sounds fantastic. We've got a little bit of atmosphere with the billow noise, which I think just adds character to the instrument. And yeah, I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing I could see myself using. You can obviously add effects and make new sounds. You can tweak the sampler, the attack, and turn this into a pad or something like that. But just as a starting point, I mean, I love the sound of the Harmonium, and it just sounds really warm and natural. And I feel like the sampler did a really good job of helping us translate that in a really easy, streamlined way. So yeah, I encourage you to play with the sampler if you use Logic. If you use a different DAW, I'm sure there's a similar functionality in your DAW. But as a starting point, it took me an hour to do this, and now I've got a new instrument in my palette to use on pieces. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next week.